Welcome to our Anything Goes podcast. This is something we do as Village Church where we tackle issues and questions that people submit, or sometimes it's just culturally relevant stuff that's going on. And obviously right now in time, we're dealing with this massive impact of coronavirus all over the world, and specifically how we're going to deal with that in Canada and with our Village Church impact and our locations. So what I wanted to do is bring Pastor Josh Kruse, Dr. Josh Kruse, onto the Anything Goes podcast to talk about some of the specific issues around this. You might not know, we on Village Church staff actually have a full-out registered clinical psychologist as part of our staff pastoral team, which is an amazing blessing to have. And so at a time like right now, where so much is up in the air, there's so many issues that people are personally having to deal with, thought this would be a great opportunity to bring him into the studio here and pick his brain on this, maybe provide some help for you if you are dealing with certain things. But also then help for the rest of us to know how to deal with people around our lives who are dealing with these things so that we can be more aware and actually helpful for family members or friends or other people around us in our community. So, Josh, tell us just quickly a little bit about you, who you are, to give people an idea. And I just want to say, if you're listening to us on the podcast, you may be wondering, are we sitting really close to each other? We are not. Definitely we have not. Lots of distance between us, and we're awkwardly having a conversation from different sides of a table, and it's going to be weird. But that's weird for us and not for you listening. So, Josh, tell us, what's going on in your life? Who are you?
Yes. Josh Kruse, one of the pastors here at Village. It's privileged, been on staff for about 5.5 years, oversee counseling, marriage ministries, care ministries as well. Registered psychologist. That was a big part of my training. Actually had no direct intentions in coming into a pastoral role, and God grabbed a hold of me, and it's been awesome. I feel like I got another degree just engaging with people and learning, and the beauty and the freedom of being able to integrate faith with counseling. And I mean, for times like these, as people are going through stuff, to be able to enter in knowledgeably, to provide spiritual, psychological, relational connection and hope. Right. Married to wife Rachel, and then have 4 kids. If you're listening online, I don't look like, I look like I'm 20, but I have a 17-year-old son, 16-year-old daughter, 11-year-old daughter, and 9-year-old son. Right. So full house. We're noticing it with all this, try to remain in the house as much as possible stuff.
Right. Cool. So one of the things I love about just us as a church is around an issue like this, we sometimes, I think, maybe in faith communities, this sort of stuff can get over-spiritualized. It can go in a different way where we treat real medical things, real psychological issues in a way different than how science in the world actually deals with this stuff biologically and clinically. And what I love about us is we just say, no, we are going to actually have someone a part of our team who gets this from the real science perspective of this. And I think that's great because it's super helpful for us as a church to be able to, I think, learn from you and the impact you've had just in so many conversations with people, sessions with people, but also you have a whole team of counselors who've been trained to actually see it this way in the church, which I think is super, super helpful. So how about for you personally, over the last little while, as all this stuff has unfolded, what have you found to be maybe the worst part for you personally, like that you're just experiencing yourself going, man, this whole change of society, I hate this part of it myself, and here's what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, well, it's definitely been a progression. It's interesting just following the news and the ripple effect of, wow, that's concerning out there. And as it starts getting closer to home, it gets really close to home. Friends, family, especially finance stuff, people who either know that they don't have a job right now, and within our with our family context, close friends, and then also people who don't know going forward, or maybe one of the spouses has lost their job, and so that's been a direct one. And then the health stuff too. So my grandma, my wife's Oma, how are they doing? Are we making sure that they have all their needs cared for? So it's almost like it gets closer and closer to home, almost down by the day. And so that's been really big. I felt unsettled in this. We're in different times right now. And so what is that about? How do we navigate this? How do we do this? One thing seems somewhat trivial, but it was a big deal. Like, we were set up to go to Hawaii, my wife and I. So We don't do many trips. Last time we did a big trip together was probably, I think, 2007. And so this is a big deal. It's not like we do this every year. And so we're a month away, and here we go. And then all of a sudden the news gets closer and closer. And then realizing, I don't know what it was, maybe 2 weeks ago, yeah, it's not happening. Right. So, yeah, that's been difficult too. And then readjusting, kids now being at home, like my grade 12 son, this is his last year of school. It looks very different. We went, got him a blazer, like a suit, I think probably 3 weeks ago. I don't know if he's wearing that. I don't know if they're going to do like a grad thing. Can we return that? Like even some of the like little detail pieces in there, that's been really hard. On positive end, yeah, I mean, we've been able to get a little bit more rest. We're trying to be more intentional. So it's almost like a cabin mindset or camping type thing. Hey, we don't have a lot. We have access to technology. But that gets old. Unless I discover new apps or new things on the internet, I feel like I've exhausted the internet. And for the kids as well.
You found the end.
Yes, that's
I
right.
got to the end of the internet.
And it's a little less satisfying than I had hoped. And so boredom starts coming in. But with that, I do find like we're getting more creative. We'll play board games like we haven't before. We're now starting to think outside of the box of, I think you can go online and then you can do Zoom or FaceTime, and then also like we could do a board game at the same time. I'm not a big board game person. It's just all of a sudden we played poker the other day. I had these chips a box I had never opened, and now we're using the poker chips, and so teaching my kids wonderful stuff, but having fun with it.
It's an opportunity to teach your children how to gamble. It's fantastic.
Yes, yeah. So we'll
one
come
of the
out
silver
of this.
linings of this whole thing. Yeah.
We will be changed people. And then at the bigger level, so like, as you've been rolling with as well, like the church is changing in positive ways in the sense of it looks so different. And so how do we engage with this? Like systems, structures we've had in place. Okay, we need new systems or structure, like now, like we needed it yesterday. One of our pastors was then talking about, it's like we're building the plane in the air. Like the plane is up, it's going and all this, but let's make sure that we're doing this really well. How do we meet the people? So that's been an exciting piece. Like we can actually reach out in new ways, even down to, whether it's podcasts or sermons, whatever's then going out there. People that wouldn't normally go to church, like they don't have to leave their home. They might tune in for 5 minutes, but that's 5 minutes more within a church, so to speak, or access to sermons, worship than they'd ever have. So that gets me fired up. Like, and even so, Rachel, my wife, and I have been praying more than we normally do, been in the Word more than we normally do. Part of it's time, but then also it's like, hey, we're in different times. Like, let's lean in. God, what are you doing here? Like, we're praying for revival coming from this. So that, like, God didn't like take a step back and I don't know what's going on here. What are we going to do? Right. He's very much involved and we want to get on board online. And so kind of feel fired up about that.
Cool. So let's talk about a couple of the issues. So I think when something like this happens, it seems to me that it's almost like a big magnifying glass gets brought out over society. And it's not like what we're going to talk about here in terms of issues are things that never existed. It's almost like, no, now everyone has to confront these issues because there's nowhere to hide. And it's like, anxiety and fear and the loss of control and human-to-human contact, isolate. These are things that people are dealing with every day. It's just that this happens and suddenly it all is exposed. And now more people are having to face this. And I wanted to get into a couple of those things. So let's start with maybe the issue of fear. Because you watch the news because you want to know what you're supposed to do and not. You watch the news because you're trying to get a handle on where is it going and what am I supposed to be doing and can I still go out and can I go to work and all these things. Where's the stock market? So you kind of need to tune in to some level. But on the other hand, it's a lot of bad news and not a lot of answers about what's coming next. So how does a person specifically deal with that? If they're a person and maybe they're listening to this or they know someone who is, like, what is that experience? Explain for us what that experience is like for a person when they enter into that mode of like fear, that anxiety and fear that just starts to take over. What is that experience?
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying. It's not like something new then came in. So yes, coronavirus new, but not in terms of the human experience. That magnifying glass, it's almost like fear is there. It's actually like, if we look at the big picture, it's adaptive. Like we need fear. Like we need to have concern within ourselves. It needs to show up in our thinking, in our bodies, our physiology, what we're feeling, to result in action. We either need to step into something, step into action, or sometimes step back. Like, I'm thankful for
Yeah.
fear because it keeps my kids from, like, even just walking off a cliff.
Right.
It's something that's wired into us. Actually, I did a study a long time ago, the visual cliff, where, you've got 2 little ones, right?
Yeah.
And so if we put them on a table and then it was glass and it kept going, they would hesitate at the part that there was just glass there. Like, there's something God wired into us to say, hey, danger, careful,
Right.
what's going on? So we're wired to tune into things. But then, that magnifying glass, the volume level can be higher for some people than others. So it's almost like we're carrying whatever we were carrying even coming into this, and then this is added for some people, minimal. Like, and they actually need to probably have a little more healthy fear or respect for. So the social distancing piece, it's like, no, this should show up on your radar more so. And there are others where it's way on the other end, like perpetual panic then coming in. And they may have then revved higher anyways, just even biologically, we're all wired different. Life circumstances could impact that too, to where there's this vigilance or a tuning in to a greater extent. So all of a sudden things become somewhat unsettled. What's happening?
Right.
And then you talk about that news exposure piece. It's in our face, and then it just starts feeding what's going on within us. So I think it can show up. I mean, let's even talk about our bodies, like heart racing, a heaviness, a fatigue that comes in, even just this like buzzing that happens of, I don't know what's happening, but I just feel a little bit off right now.
Right.
And once again, a whole range of what that looks like for people. It shows up emotionally, so fear itself, but then with some of that fatigue, with some of that not knowing of what's going to happen in the future, and even then tomorrow, discouragement, despair, depression, all sorts of stuff can come in, even around boredom and loneliness, absolutely. So we're going to talk about in a bit of just that, the importance of social contact and what do I do in light of that? And then our thinking, of course, it's then what's the focus? And that's that, I think it's important to recapture the beauty of how God wired us of we're supposed to notice things when they're out of place.
Right.
Change happens, we should tune into that. It's like walking into the house and it's like, oh, the couch is in a different place. I need to notice that because I might trip over it. Or, hey, did you get a new haircut? Is that a new outfit? What's this? What's happening? We pick up on those pieces. Because if we didn't, every environment's brand new and we have to take in all that information. And that's just overwhelming.
I always miss the haircut thing with my wife.
Something's
Causes a
different
lot
about
of
you.
anxiety.
Yes. Like what I'm seeing. But we're then prime for that, right?
Yeah.
We need to see these things. We need to notice. Hard part is there's a lot to notice if you're then swimming in the news, as people
Right.
are, even you don't even have to look for it. Like, so whether it's social media type stuff and all of a sudden it's showing up, you don't have to be digging even, and then it's there, and what happens, it can then get into racing thoughts. We start spinning with it. It shows up in our body. We start feeling that, and then the output of that is what we end up doing. Do we then disengage and shut down, or even fight, flight, freeze stuff? Or do we actually start panicking and irritability then comes up and we try to organize this whole world around us? We're basically trying to put into place things that are now new and showing up right here. That takes a lot of energy that I didn't actually have a reserve for coming in. And it's one thing if it's an hour, it's another thing if it's a day, but man, is this days, is this weeks, is this months? What's this
Right.
going to look like for us?
So on the fear piece, just kind of more from that psychological perspective, that clinical side, a person who's experiencing that, what are some of the practical things that you would say to a person who's experiencing some of those things you were talking about, where maybe they're sort of just realizing, even if they're listening to this, that, oh, that's actually what I'm dealing with because this is how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about, there are things like, the kind of sources you rely on could be a simple thing. It's one thing to put on, CBC News Network or whatever news, and they're going to tell you whatever. Go on and read an actual, accredited clinical paper on where the virus is at, and that's one category of things. And then you have, the thing your aunt shared on Facebook, right? And all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's like the old garbage in, garbage out, good in, good. It's like, control that as one step maybe in your life and kind of assess where are you getting information from. But what else can people do if it's that fear piece to help kind of mitigate that a little bit?
Sure. I think almost bottom up. Moving to what you're saying just a second of what do we do in our body even. Seen a lot of posts around take a deep breath. And And sometimes that can be a bit of that calm down sort of thing. Like, that's not helpful, but it actually is. Why do people say it? It's cliche for a reason. Because what happens is our physiology gets acting up and wired up, and we can get dysregulated, which feeds the racing thoughts, which feeds the unsettled within us. And so can we take a step back from whatever it is that's fearing us, panicking us, concerning us? Take that deep breath, start to slow down, even find rest, whatever that looks like person by person. There can, if you're able to come into social contact with people within your home, ask for a hug, reach out, sit close to somebody, take a bath, warm tea, like all those things that are typically soothing.
Right.
You need those. Your body has a little bit more to deal with than it did before. And you may not have the same outlets, like let's say going out for a run or a hike or a jog, and that's more and more limited now. And so how do you actually just care for your body and the basics of that in there too?
Right.
And then emotionally, part of it is then grieving the changes. So we have our expectations for life. This is part of the adaptive aspect of this is going to happen here, structures, routines, wonderful, great. We need them as much as we can find them. But then when something else comes in, a new reality comes in, that gap between expectations and then reality can become much larger. How do we bridge the gap? We grieve. And it doesn't just mean somebody died and I need to grieve. No, a grieve is a change from the expectations you had into the new reality. And we move through a place of greater acceptance. And as we talk about stages of the cycle of grieving, it's like a denial. Like, this isn't a thing. Oh, it's just going to blow over. It's like Y2K all over again. And it's not. It's different. And there are things we need to do about it. Their anger can come in, and just the frustration. Like, if you think of kids then throwing a tantrum, like, what? I thought we were going to do this, and you said I could get a candy bar. You said, and then we can do adult tantrums too, which are, similar. We're then complaining about stuff. We're getting irritable, questioning what's going on. We're trying to grasp some sort of control. And then even a depression. It doesn't have to be clinical. It can be, but a sadness, like man, this is hard, moving to a place of greater acceptance. Because once you're moving to that reality, this is the reality. This is what we're in right now. Kids are now, a lot of them have to be homeschooled. That is a huge shift. That's a huge shift, definitely for the kids, for the parents involved. What if they both still have work? What a blessing that then is. But then how are we going to navigate this? Or one of them's out of work. It's one thing to be a parent. It's another thing to be a teacher, right? Oh man, that's the reality. We then grieve that. We don't pretend it's not happening. We don't just, well, everything's gonna be great, let's be fine. No, that's a change, that's hard. And can that just be okay? So you're validating yourself in that. Like, yeah, this is upsetting, and I'm gonna move and work towards just embracing what is right now.
Right. I love the part about the physiological stuff people can do. I think it's really interesting, because I was thinking about, and maybe you can tell me if my analogy works or not, but it's like, I can only mentally rehearse having a good golf swing so much. At some point, I need to actually exercise the muscles physiologically to make the right swing. Then I can start doing it, but I can't do it until I start practicing it that way. And it's almost like you have this stuff thrown at you in life, and then you have to go, okay, something like, hey, try every night to turn your phone off, put it in a drawer, not watch the news, and watch a TV show or play a game or whatever with literally no external thing for 1 hour every night. And you might notice, okay, I actually feel better, like better, but like this actually makes a difference because you're actually rehearsing muscle memory to develop a pattern of how to actually feel in some of those moments, which actually makes a difference.
Yes.
So I love that physiological piece, because I think that's tangible that everyone can actually do.
Yeah. So let's pull back from coronavirus altogether and just working with our physiology, our psychology in there. A lot of times then in counseling, we'll talk about people, especially if they're carrying angst, fears, worries, whatever it is, panic. Okay, part of your homework for this next week is work on slowing down your breathing and even doing some of the grounding type stuff as we talk about. It's even just look in the room. What are 5 things I can then see? I'm getting out of my head, and whatever fear or panic is fueling this angst within me, I'm now thinking about, I see then lights, I see this table, I see this microphone, I see you, I'm taking this in. What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? And then sensory stuff's big as well. Even just, whether it's putting our hands on the most relaxed part of our body and just tuning into that a little bit more, It takes the focus out of the feared stimulus and into relative calm and right here in the moment. They'll talk about that a lot with mindfulness. You have to watch the kind of Buddhist philosophy stuff with that.
Sure.
But the true mindfulness, just being mindful, there's a lot going on right now. If we get really quiet, we can probably hear sound of lights, or even at your house or wherever you are listening, you can pick up on different sounds. It pulls you into the moment, which can bring a calm then within you. And like you're saying, the more you practice that, there's that procedural memory. It's interesting. I'll be sitting with a client, and let's say they're panicking, or I'm just teaching them how to slow things down a little bit. I'll start doing some deep breathing. We actually start to resonate off one another. It's either I'm going to come up to their angst, or they're going to come down to my calm, and we're going to somehow find each other in that. So I start taking deep breaths, but because I've practiced it a lot, I start moving into like a yawning type thing, because my body's like, oh yeah, no, all systems, we're super efficient how God made us. And so it's like, oh, I know what we're doing here. Oh, riding a bike, yeah, pedal, balance, here we go. Oh, deep breathing, calm, yeah, we can't go to the panic place because we're doing the calm thing right now. It actually shows up in our nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, panic, fight, flight sort of stuff, parasympathetic, and they can't hang out together. So we start practicing outside of angst, slowing down, deep breathing, so that in angst, it's like, okay, well, what's happening? What are we doing here? And then you keep at it, and all of a sudden your physiology starts to come down. Best time to practice, in your bed at night.
Right.
I love that. Put your phone off to the side. Don't feed whatever could cause angst or even stimulate your brain in that. Lay down, take those deep breaths, just even in your head. I'm going to do this for 10, 15 minutes. What's the worst thing that happens? You fall asleep. Oh, I didn't finish the exercise. Great. And then what you can do is take that in the moment where it's like, oh, this news just came out, or this just happened, or I just got a call from someone, whatever it is, and okay, take a step back. Yeah, this is upsetting. This is new. This is, there's some fear within this. I need to be tuned into this. Calm down so we can actually engage more of our brain to decide, okay, what's our action step here? And it's not panic-filled. It's actually grounded to go forward, more fully engaged.
Yeah, and I love trying to cut off some of those things, those inputs, in a way where I can't access them. Now, I'm not great at this, but I've done this at different points, and you feel it. You actually feel it. I'm going to go for a walk and not bring my phone, and I'm going to walk for 30 minutes. And you go, okay, well, you leave the house, and there's nothing you can do now to access things. So you kind of you kind of have that acceptance moment, like maybe the first 3 or 4 minutes of your walk. But then you're like, yeah, I guess the world didn't blow up while I was away on this walk. So that's okay. And it just forces you to not be on with all that stimulus. Now, obviously we have to be careful what we do and what we don't socially right now and all that kind of thing. But it's finding those ways to, I'm not accessing, I'm not going to let myself in certain modes. What about those of us who are around people who are dealing with this? Like, I want to make sure we're sensitive to the fact that so many people are dealing with this around us that we might not even realize. So maybe quickly, like, what are a couple things we need to be thinking about as people around people dealing with this? Because it might be us, but it might not be us, but it's definitely people around us in our lives.
Yeah, I think check-ins are huge. So whether it's a spouse, family member, close friend, even just let them know, like, oh, I was listening to this podcast, and you know what, I'd like to check in more. You can be explicit about that. Can we do like even scaling? Some people hate this, putting numbers on it. A lot of people, it's good because you have to tune in. Scale 1 to 10, where are you? 10 is, I am absolutely panicking right now. And on the 1 level, it's like, I'm on a beach in Hawaii. Things are then great. But that can change in a moment throughout the day. But even, so let's say if you're apart from somebody in your family or a friend, roommate, whatever it is, and you're coming into contact, hey, where are you right now? And if they're at a 9, that's good, or it's good to know. And it's good that they can actually share that with you. Because part of what makes this overwhelming, as we talk about with isolation stuff, is doing it on your own. Like that can be so burdensome. And even as I was talking about a minute ago of regulating, if so let's say, hey, Jer, how you doing? I'm an 8 right now. You know what, I'm a 5. So I'm not on the beach, so to speak, in terms of calm, but I'm in a different place. Okay, let's borrow a little bit. What's going on? What's happening for you? Yeah, I read this, I heard this, this is what's going on. I'm bored, and that's frustrating. I don't know what to do. I don't know what things look like going forward. Finances, I'm running the numbers, and I don't know what's gonna happen, and I don't know what tomorrow will be like. Oh, okay, that's a lot. And you just move in with empathy. You're not going to fix it. You don't know what tomorrow brings as well. So you listen,
Right.
you try to understand what's going on the best you can. Just give them space, like that emotional space, like big ears, small mouth, and then move into what you can do with them. Okay, let's pray. Let's do this right now. Because what you're doing, and I have a practice of this for clients who give me their consent or actually want this, I'll pray with them at the end of a session. Because what I'm doing is I'm taking whatever's coming up during that time, holding them emotionally, figuratively in that time, and then connecting them with God, who's going to go with them going forward. He can then carry those burdens with them. So many promises in his word, and just my experience of that, huge, right? And then being able to say, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Jared, can we pray? And then moving into that, because it reminds us who's in control, it reminds them too. And that's just even in the natural sense, but in the powerful supernatural sense, we are actually then invoking some of what God's wanting to do to care for them, love on them in this too.
Yeah, and finally on the fear thing, just tell us a little bit about that thing that we shouldn't do with people. Maybe it's trying to fix it for them thing. It's like if a person's really going through this, like they really feel that anxiety, and it's to a level of, it's not just, hey, I'm a little stressed out, but it's, I have an actual, this is psychologically affecting me to a certain level, and it's impacting my life, and it's a fairly serious thing. The idea of kind of like, oh, well, let me rationally explain to you why you shouldn't feel that way. How can we resist doing that? I know it's something I've learned even in pastoral ministry over years, right? Is sometimes actually just someone wants to come in and talk to a pastor. It's like the best thing I can do is just shut up for half an hour and let them talk. And at the end go, okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.
Can I? And then they thank you for helping them. And you're like, this is, your job's easy, Josh.
Yes,
like what on earth are you
going
going yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that, because I want to make sure we're not, doing the opposite of helping with the people around us too.
Yeah, I think big thing, show up, shut up. That's huge then coming in. And the hard part is some of those like fix-its but wait a minute, what's your source of information? What's this? Getting to that point, there's value there. Truth, you may even come into truth in that. The hard part is just even working with our brain, you can view it almost on 3 levels. You have your rational thinking brain, your emotional, like your limbic system then in there, and then you have your just base level fight, flight, freeze sort of stuff going on. That's where panic kicks in and overloads everything in there. That's why I start with, hey, your body, slow it down so that you can better engage emotionally and logically. Thing is, we jump to logic a lot of the times. So let's say, you're at an 8. Let's say I'm at a 3. Let's say I'm at a 2. Things are great. I'm just taking in the sunshine. Here we go. Just got the fan in my face, looking out the window. And you then come to me with, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, and what about the kids? What are we going to do there? I mean, they're getting all cooped up. And wait a minute, what you need to do is this, and that. Your brain, if you're at an 8, you're not hearing my wonderful logic at that point, which is a disservice to you and to me. So we can even view this selfishly. If I want my beautiful wisdom to be heard, I need to then go bottom up I need to be present with you, and that covers that safe presence. That helps soothe our fight, flight, freeze, friend or foe. Okay, this is a friend here. And then we move in emotionally to try to understand and hold that empathy piece of like, wow, no, that sounds like a lot. I can see how concerning it is. Or sometimes we're just there and it's those, I don't even know what you call them, but like, man, that says so much. It's that holding space. And what happens? It starts to bring things down. And so that rational, logical part is less washed in all the hormones, neurotransmitters that are then firing and just covering up reasonable thinking. And things start to come down, and now that very same thing that you would have said at the beginning that would have been dismissed, led to a fight, and this works well for marriage too, is now it's got a seat at the table because we cleared some space by listening to the other ones that are screaming out. Friend, foe, whoa, emotions, what's happening, fear, terror, okay, we've heard you, we've listened, and actually they talk about name it to tame it. It starts to, fear is showing up, this is showing up, it comes down, and all of a sudden, what's your source? I wonder who told you that, or I wonder if it might be good to then engage financially in this way or that way, whatever it might be. And we're actually providing really good care to them. So that's where, man, I can listen to somebody for a long time. And if there's a lot of angst, I'm holding. to then come to that place of, wow, that's a lot. And now what's happening? I'm holding that with them. It's half as loaded for them, and then now can speak in some truth, if there's even room for it. Sometimes I'll even do the practical, like, ears or advice? Like, what are you looking for here?
Right.
Some people
Yeah,
don't
that's good.
actually want that advice, and you can have the best advice in the world. They just want your ears, your heart, your empathy.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me because I think sometimes what happens is when you try and show someone that they're viewing it wrong, it actually communicates to them what they're feeling is wrong, that they're wrong and they're doing something wrong and they're feeling something wrong.
Don't trust yourself.
And it's interesting in the management world. So I'm not a doctor like you, but like in the management world, they've done studies that show when you're dealing with staff and you're giving feedback, when you critique somebody in any kind of negative way, it's actually a different part of their brain that kicks in than when you empathetically talk to a person. It's a different part of their brain. And that empathetic part of the brain, when you're communicating to someone, say in a management world thing, is the learning part of a brain. The part that is turned on when you critique someone negatively and they feel like they're wrong is a defense mechanism, primitive part of the brain, which cannot learn. And so it's fascinating, the research, that if you actually want someone to learn or to change behavior, you can't criticize them. It's kind of the science on some level. It's like you have to actually empathetically encourage and enter in with them, or they can't learn new behaviors. You can curb a behavior through fear or whatever one time, but you're not going to learn new pathways in your brain. So it's fascinating that it's kind of similar to what you're actually talking about. Now, in all of this, there's this kind of related piece, which is this loss of control issue. And I think a lot of people are feeling that even right now. That what's the thing behind some of this anxiety is just no one knows what's happening. And it's almost this like moment of anything could come up today, anything, and there's nothing would be a surprise. Like I could lose my job. The stock market could literally go to zero. Everyone I know could get this virus. The death rate could spike. No one would be surprised, whatever the news is, I think, at this point. And that sets people into this bizarre place, it feels like, psychologically, where how do you function? Because it's interesting to me, the idea that as just creatures, we actually don't have much control of our world, but we somehow psychologically have, I don't know, through development or evolution, I don't know, and God's wiring of us or whatever, we've developed these abilities to sort of hold that truth at bay, that we think we have control, so we're able to function. But then something like this happens and we go, it's kind of like the veil is pulled back and we go, no, none of us have any control over the world in our lives. How on earth do you deal with that? The fact that you just realize you have no control over the world or your own life.
Yeah, well, in the least, it's alarming. It's unsettling as well, because even as we were talking about earlier, we try to then hone in what we can. We create, they call them schemas, or these shortcuts. Like, I can't think about all the steps of riding a bike or even forming words right now as we talk, and all. I can't. Like, it's overwhelming, and so we create these shortcuts, and then all of a sudden, one of those shortcuts, like, that doesn't fit this situation. But it's not just one, it's then multiple shortcuts, and like, wait a minute, all systems go, I now need to devote all my energy into this. That's where then our system is actually working when some of that angst comes in. It's like, hey Josh, wake up. You need to pay attention to this. It's like you're in the mission control room and like something's off. Have you seen Inside Out? You know that cartoon?
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. They have a cool depiction of, I think he's the green guy, the fear. They're sitting at this mission control panel, and you can view it like the brain. And fear's job is basically like, all right, bring it. What's happening? Oh, danger. I think they show through the lens of a kid where he's going through. It's like, whoa, power cord. Oh, first day of school. What's happening? This could happen. Okay, is your fly up? Okay, good. We're fine here. And it's basically, we need to then tune into that. So what are we doing? We're trying to control what we can control around us. Because if we do that, then we feel like we have more power within that. Feeling out of control, powerless, can be overwhelming and discouraging, and then there isn't a resting place for our panic. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulty pieces. So let's view our psyche in more of the extreme ends of, so let's say like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It can be, it be debilitating. Like I grieve for people who are then really caught up in that. It's very real. It's an anxiety disorder. So what happens is an obsession then comes in, and then the compulsion comes in order to balance that out. So even for the brain, they call it the gate theory. This obsession, this fear, this worry comes in, and it just starts spinning round and round and round. Right. Starts grinding down. We feel it in our physiology, racing thoughts, fixating on it. And then what happens is they move into more of a compulsive behavior to open that gate. If I do this, then I have a semblance of control over it. It starts to come down.
Right.
And so if let's say it's checking the stove or the locks on the door, anxiety is saying, oh, did you check the door? So somebody without an OCD brain would be like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I did, or I might check one more time and then we're okay. But then if your brain looking for control is then, I'm not sure if I did. So sometimes people will then create rhythms or routines. 7 times I'll then check the lock to do this. Yeah. And that's moving into controlling something that feels uncontrollable in order to bring this grounding, calm within our system. So I realize that many of the people that are listening or watching, that they don't have OCD, yet we continue to be human. We talk about continuums of things, less categorical. And so what happens is, well, now health is a little bit different. Freedoms are different. Like I can't just go out. So Rachel and I love walking. We've done a lot of walking in light of this. And my fear is any day it's like, no, you can't even leave your house, and we'll follow that. That'll be hard for us. But we're doing the social distancing thing. So we'll be walking down the pathway in our neighborhood, and then we see ahead somebody's there. We cross over to the other side, round some cars. There's another person. So we're like zigzagging up and down the streets, just trying to go out and control a little bit of what's happening then within our world, trying to ground things a little bit in there too. And so when things change, when all of a sudden we can't go out, we can't go for walks, finances are different, I don't know if the next paycheck's coming in. I grieve for a lot of the small businesses then out there right now of we have to then shut it down. What are we going to do, and how are we going to keep things open? That should show up in your system. There should be some concern that comes with that. But then here's the tipping point of where are we looking to find that control? Like, is it within us? Like, yeah, no, we're slap in the face in many ways, myself included, of you have far less control than you actually think you do, Josh. But then what do we do with that? Like, it's unsettling. So, okay, let's clean the house. And for some, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of you are just loving how clean your house is. It's a way to manage and soothe. The risk is when it becomes extreme and it gets like obsessive in that regard. But then where can we actually find our anchor? So in unsettled times like this, if we're looking to ourselves to save ourselves, that angst is just going to keep going and going and going. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, let alone an hour from now. I've been limiting news contact. If I know Trudeau's speaking or the health minister, then I will then check an hour or two later for that. And then also I am trusting friends. So Rachel, she's my friend and my wife, but I'll check in with her. If you hear something, let me know. It's this implied thing. But we're not both going to be digging into that. So get a friend if it's a difficult area for you. Realizing that I can't control things, because I think temptations for me too, and I imagine for many people out there, of I'm going to find that piece of information that's going to lead to, there we go, now I know. It's not out there. I told you, I found the end of the internet. I'll tell you guys right now as you're looking for it. There's nothing there. And so these are the times where I think we really need to be saying, well, okay, who is in absolute control? And here's the risk. We start throwing verses out. Just trust God. He's then good. Do not be anxious about anything. Here's the thing. Those are absolute truths, right? They can be, well, I'll be honest, they can be damaging to people if we are neglecting the person that we're delivering that to. If we don't have a heart for them, if we don't have that empathy, it's going to fall flat. But if we can then hear and understand where people are coming from, if we can even hear and understand, like, yeah, of course I'm anxious about this, validate ourselves, and then land and anchor in those truths, like he's in absolute control. I love, there's this video on the internet where it pans in. So I'm Josh sitting in Surrey, in the province of British Columbia, in Canada, North America, Western Hemisphere, world, universe, and it just starts like panning out again and again and again. And you find out how small we are, how little control we are, or control we have. And then in this big picture, it's, well, and God created all of that. Like, he knows the plan. He knows tomorrow. Like, you're not going to find it on the internet. You then go to him and you anchor in the truths of his word, whether that leads to a complete soothing, relaxing experience in your body or not. What are you going to grab a hold of? Is it the internet? Is it what Auntie Susie's then saying? Is it your own devices of I'll organize this or do that? No, care for yourself, yes, but then reach on, grab a hold of who he is and his plans and his intentions then for us. And we operate in trust, knowing that we can't control everything. He can. And so he's the best anchor to actually hold on to in the midst of this.
Yeah, that's good. I know I've talked about it before. I'm sort of obsessed with the book, but for me, the book of Job is fascinating for this, right? It's the story of a person who literally, his life goes completely out of control with no answers. And his friends, other people want to explain away things simply, but it doesn't make sense to him. And so he has to live in this confusion of, I've had all this adversity and I don't have any idea why, and I can't change it, and there's nothing I can seem to do. But the story is fascinating to me because what the heart of the story is that Job ultimately realizes the most important thing to him is knowing he's got God or not. And that the book is really trying to tell us being able to have God is actually, that's wisdom in the midst of anything, is leaning into God. And God, at the end of the story, is, as you would know, but for listeners and people, is God makes, his speech at the end, and he basically says, look, Job, you're right. You don't understand any of this, but you didn't walk away from me in it. Instead, you doubled down and you were honest with me about how you felt, and you actually brought me into your uncertainty, and you brought me into your anxiety, not with pithy little Instagram meme quotes from Christian sources or things, but like in the real raw difficulty of it. You accused me of things even, but you're in the right because you came to me in this moment because I'm the one who controls it all. And that's his whole speech is, who's the one who actually placed the stars? Who's the one who actually can make it rain? Who's the one who can whatever? You can't do that. I created all of this stuff. I'm the one. And so what, and the thing I would like to wrap this up is in this episode is this idea of us coming at this as a church from that two-pronged perspective. We have that science, we have that clinical stuff we're talking about, which is really important to not ignore. We also have this spiritual side of it. And that's what's so amazing about being a part of a church community and a family like ours is we can draw on both of those things that, there are practical things we need to do to just be smart about this stuff. But also we have such amazing truth and hope in some of this that it's an opportunity to use those together and hopefully that help. Now, we're not imagining someone listens to this podcast and they're cured of some, a psychological trial that they're going through, but hopefully that helps, and being in community around that can help. So what we'll do is we got other stuff I think to hit on this issue. Sure. Let's turn that into the next episode. And for now, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, for being with us, and look for part 2 of our Anything Goes podcast episode with Dr. Josh Kruse.
Yeah, thanks, Sheriff.